Welcome to the Real Life Man podcast, where we discuss masculinity, faith, and the struggles we don't always talk about. Hey everybody, so welcome back to the RLM podcast, and we are joined here by Dan Bryant, and he's a good friend of mine, and I wanted to kind of get your introduction, Dan, of who you are, where you're at, what you do, and all of that, if that sounds good.
Okay. Uh, Thank you. Dan Bryant, as you said, we live in Senegal, West Africa. I was born and grew up in France. My parents were missionaries in France until not too long ago, and I went to French schools most of my younger years, and to college in the States, and then worked for a while, went get some more Bible training, and have been in with got married and have been about 28 years ago now, and have been in West Africa, either Guinea Conakry or Senegal for the last 21 years, I guess. That's what I do. I don't know if that's answers.
No,
But we
that's
have four kids, I guess, my wife and I. My wife is also a missionary kid. She grew up in Japan. Ginny,
Oh,
sorry. We have four kids, and several young people that live with us now, which is not uncommon here in West Africa, at least among African families, to have people move in with you from a village so they can go to school in the city, or relatives that come and stay with you for a variety of reasons. But so we've kind of tried to follow that model a little bit. And we have right now we have two kids of our own with us, our daughter who's 18 and a son who's 16. And we have two other high schoolers that go to the same school. They go to an English speaking Christian school here in Dakar in Senegal, and then we have a couple other, like I said, a couple other students who live with us. Another young man, and he has a 2-year-old daughter who's also with us. So we have a full house.
man. How big's your house by chance?
uh, five five bedrooms.
Okay.
I don't know floor space what it is, but it's a nice house I've provided. Um,
Can you explain to everyone what or at least at the time when I came to visit you in Guinea Conakry, you were working on translations. I wanted to know, are you still doing that? Where are you at with the translation of the Bible for the language you were translating it in? And what are you doing as a Bible teacher? And that'd be great to kind of hear as well.
okay, when you visited us, I don't remember what year that was, Mark. Do you remember?
I
Uh,
believe it was in 2012.
um,
2012. Yep.
yeah.
Was the
So
end of
we
the
were,
world movie came out, and then when everybody thought the end of the world was going to come, 2012 or
well,
that one.
and so did you in some respects, I think. It was a bit of a bit of a challenging time, as I recall.
That a little bit.
Um, yeah, I'd spared your life there. When you came to visit us, we'd been in the village for about 8 years at that point, and we're involved in a church plant. It was a small village church there, and we were still actually in the final phases of language learning the Landuma language, one of the local languages. And I wanted to be involved in the Bible translation, and that was done. We ended up leaving in 2014, well, 2015, really, for the sake of our kids, so that they could go to an English speaking school, and we could still stay in Africa. So that's why we came to the neighboring country of Senegal, and have been here since. But Um, I have had the chance to continue working with the translation since from afar, but not as much as I had hoped to. It was my desire was to, after investing 10 years learning the language, I wanted to be able to use it. But um, I have I have been able to a degree. There's actually a young man who's one of the young men who stayed with us initially is Landuma, and he's actually going to be taking over the translation. So
Awesome.
I'm not as needed as I thought I might have been. Uh, so God has directed us through kind of not our not my first choice, but it's actually been um, a thing that God has really helped me to really enjoy. Is to be involved in training others. Um, so we've been part of a team that runs a training program in French for West Africans who are interested in knowing God more intimately and studying His Word. And so we have about 20 students right now, and we started. It was kind of there were a few years of trial. We started kind of a smaller program, and now we started after some more planning, a larger program. And so like I said, we have about 20 students. It's an online hybrid program. So we meet once a week, but most of the courses are done online. And we're just going through the Bible right now. And eventually there'll be some more courses that are more missions oriented to train people who are interested in reaching the unreached.
That's crazy. And you're basically teaching the people from the country, giving them the resources to be able to propagate the gospel in Dakar and Guinea and all of those places, right?
Yes, yes. Although I think we have students from 7 different countries in our program. So there's a wide variety of countries and people groups represented. So it's kind of fun. It's
So
in
Dan,
French.
do
The
I
people
understand correctly that between you and your wife, you guys have lived and connected with the West African culture, French culture, Japan, and US?
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
That's amazing in itself.
Yeah.
and all the subcultures that you have in Africa too.
Oh,
I mean, it's
Yeah.
different from one.
That's true. They are. And actually add that to the mix. One of the students living with us now is Korean. And one of them is from Benin. So we had
Nice.
Wow.
quite an international flair.
how many languages do you speak, Dan?
uh, French and English and Landuma fluently, and then I've studied a few others, but those are the ones that I speak well. Yeah.
That's impressive. I had to learn German living in Austria for many years. I'd never had a foreign language
Okay.
until I was in my 40s, and it ate my lunch in the beginning. Now I love it.
Okay.
But man, to know other languages is quite impressive, and to not just to know a language, but to live in another culture with the language is different, as you know.
Yes, it
Yeah,
is.
that's impressive.
Yeah. German is
So,
not
so what was it
easy
like?
language.
Yeah, so what was it like though growing up as a missionary kid in France, like with your family? Um, because I'm guessing neither of your parents were from France, is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, they went to France to be when I was 2 years before I was born. Um, it was a good experience. I don't think I would trade it. Um, uh, there's growing up as a third culture kid, you can appreciate things from different cultures. And in the standard, you don't feel at home in any one culture completely, but you can adapt fairly easily to different ones. Uh, yeah, I was the oldest of 4 kids. Um, so we went to French schools, except when we went back to the States on home assignment for a year at a time. So I was in the States in second grade and in seventh grade. Those were seventh grade, especially was a hard year. Um, because we were in two different locations in the States, and it's a hard time to go through adjustments.
Hmm.
Uh, but I think I was just overall. I sounds kind of silly, I guess, but I kind of wished I was somewhere else. I would a friend introduced me to these books by Louis L'Amour, a
Hmm.
Western writer. I always dreamed I could grow up in the West. I'd grow up in the West. So
Uh,
maybe being satisfied with where I was a bit of sometimes a challenge, even though we were in a beautiful area in the mountains in Grenoble, right where Marc grew up. Beautiful area. Nothing to be to look down on.
But it is funny, right? Because I think that's what the pain point for a lot of missionary kids or people that have grown up as third culture kids. They just have seen different places, different spaces, different cultures, and then they're like, "Well, wait, where do I fit in?" And then you don't really fit in anywhere, but you also long for a place to call home, and that's really hard to kind of do because nowhere really seems to fit. And so you're just like, well, France doesn't seem like home. America doesn't really seem like home. Does Costa Rica or does Africa seem like home? You just you keep on seeking that, but I think it's like almost a God-given gift to be like, actually, you're seeking for me. You're seeking for the fire, or at least that's how I take it for myself, right? Just being like,
hmm.
we're never going to be satisfied down here until we're with our Father in heaven. So at least that's been my experience, but I can imagine most likely, you felt the same at points, Dan, or even Justin and Chris, right? I'm sure Justin, Dan, and Chris, you
Just
guys all probably felt some of that same feeling, same longing, but I'm not sure if that's the truth for everyone.
Justin, what are your thoughts for you?
Well, I've lived overseas here and there, but only in my adulthood. So it's a different thing. Um, my wife still laughs at me that when I retire, I want to retire on the shore of Lake Michigan where I grew up. She's like, "What's wrong with you? Why do you want that snow?"
Oh.
But I mean, that's what it
Sen-
is.
Sense of home? Is it a sense of
Yeah,
home?
it's familiar.
Okay.
Yeah, the seasons. I like the lake. It's all really nice. But
mm,
she likes the mountains. We'll see.
Well, Mark and Justin know part of my story, but we moved around a lot when I was growing up. It was for dysfunctional reasons, always in the U.S. within between two states, but mainly different towns within Oklahoma. And so I can tell you, I never felt like I had a sense of home either, even though I didn't live overseas until I was an adult. And then adding that different culture aspect to it really tweaked that in my brain. And so I can say where I live today, back in Oklahoma, I feel like it's home, and yet I don't. And I've learned to be okay with that. But what I, so because this podcast is about men and the different aspects of who we are as men, I want to ask you this, Dan. So living in different cultures, what would you say? What are some commonalities you find with men in the different cultures? Because my experience has been men are men. If you peel back layers of a culture, a language, things like that, we have so much in common. Well, what have you experienced with that concerning men?
it's a it's a broad question.
Is
Um,
it too broad? I can.
well, let me give me a moment here to I think there's a lot. There's all types, all people that are. Yeah, there's all kinds of people, and it's true. Men are men. I would agree with that. And anywhere, and some of the same challenges and same struggles or same things people live for.
Well,
Well,
I think maybe
go ahead, Justin.
what might help is like, how did you, growing up, like, how did you discover who you were as a man? Like, what that looked like for you as a son of God?
Uh, it was a kind of a process. I think there was some, I lacked confidence. I didn't go through, a traumatic childhood or have really traumatic moments of loss or um, other kinds of challenges. Uh, for me, it was a lot of questions, a lot about, am I, 'cause I grew up kind of wanting to imitate my dad, as he was a missionary, and maybe I'll be a missionary too. But I even had questions of, am I even a believer? Was I sincere enough when I believed, or did I understand enough, and then I eventually came to realize that it wasn't about how sincere my faith was, or even, how much I understood in terms of the details, but it was about what he had done for me that mattered. Uh, uh, and so there was a sense of rest there. There was I guess, there were challenging times. Like I mentioned, seventh grade, it was hard living in two different places and being picked on and as an outsider.
Mm.
Um, uh, and then I did go through a period in my high school years when I was away from the Lord, where I became quite legalistic
Mm.
in middle school, high school. I was part of our church in France, was pretty interested. There's a youth group that was pretty, I guess you would say, on fire, pretty eager to serve the Lord, and had leaders who were good teachers and good examples. In fact, Mark's dad was an influence in my life in a positive way, as one of the leaders. Um, but I also I came kind of pretty like legalistic and had all these things that I had to do or not do, and it kind of discouraged me at some point. And I kind of just decided to do my own thing and that attitude lasted through sometime in 10th grade through the first year of my first year in college, when God graciously, long story, but he brought me back to himself, and partly through my father confronting me about the fact that I was wasting time in college and not doing anything and making bad choices. So, um, I
Dan,
don't.
would you feel comfortable sharing any of that from the sophomore year to freshman year? You said you kind of did your own thing. Can you
Yeah.
share some examples of that?
Uh, yeah. It started out by just, well, there was a lot of, as a hitting puberty and struggles with thought life, and um, not so much. I was kind of shy, so it's not like I was sleeping around, but I was certainly, you know, um, uh, I don't know how much you say in this podcast, but it's okay to, stuff
You can
struggles
say
with
it. You can say it. It's called Real
pornography
Life Men.
and okay, pornography and masturbation. But so that would be, so I would kind of flip flop from, this was in probably ninth grade, eighth grade, and I would go from, you know, struggling with that to really being excited about reading my Bible to, back and forth sometimes several times in a day or a week, and it just got really like discouraging. And so finally I said, this is too hard. I'm just gonna, to do what I want to do. And so started out by just, no, I don't have to spend a couple hours reading my Bible a day like I made myself do, or I don't have to, and so I can, and then I mean, I wasn't like I don't have this crazy testimony of somebody who's done all sorts of, but and I eventually started smoking pot. I guess weed is what they say today. And I my freshman year in college, I was doing quite a bit of that, and that's what my dad confronted me with, some of that.
And isn't it
Smoke.
hard, right, during those years where just like you don't know, it's hard to have direction. I think that's like what this podcast is all about too, is being able to say like, what is the direction that my life is supposed to have? And when you're inside of those years, everybody's lost. I mean, I don't think there's any man that can't say, uh, we were struggling with all of the same thing. Like that's a very common thing. We've had people that have been, hurt in so many different ways on this podcast as well, and just being like, well, how do you gain tr how do you get this help from, what do you call that, somebody that's older than you, to be able to say, hey, this is the path moving forward. The whole reason I had Woody on the podcast too was because he was a huge influence in my life, where I was just at a loss, where those same years is just like, well, what am I doing with my life? Where am I going? What am I supposed to do? And Woody was there to be able to walk alongside me, and he didn't have all the answers. Like, he'll tell you that. And he actually was like, I was only wanting to do a Bible study one-on-one with you. I didn't think it was going to turn into the mentorship that it became. And I don't think he really quite understood the full potential of a mentor that he really was, until he started doing it with me and the other guys that were inside of our in Grenoble at the time. But we were talking about like masturbation, pornography, of just the lusts of the heart, and lust, like what we want to do, what we don't, what we're, all the struggles that a guy has at that age. And it's really hard to navigate those times if you don't have someone to be that Sherpa for you. Um, and I know that that's where, we have, I mean, this is what the, real life mentoring is, the other podcast that Chris and Christina do. And they talk about what it means to accompany a young man or a young woman into real adulthood, and keep on following them throughout their life, because you never stop needing a mentor. And so it's just been really like life-giving for me, I know, from my standpoint, to have somebody that's has higher ground to say, hey, get back on track. This is what the goal is. You may not see the end, but we're gonna walk through this together. All that to say, it just does sound like your dad, Henry, was really the guy that helped you just get back on track and be like, hey, do something with your life, or get back on track, and be this is what the plan is. You may not see it, but I'll help you get there. I'm interested, like, what the involvement of your dad in that situation, but also through your life. He was a really involved guy, right?
He was very involved. Um, he wasn't the only person who spoke into my life. Uh, um, he was the one who confronted me when my freshman year in college. They were in the States for the year, and I was with them for spring break, and he asked me some questions, and kept probing, and found out that I was smoking weed and skipping classes. And so he said, well, we're not gonna continue supporting, paying for your college, because of unless you're gonna do things differently. And that's what was kind of a wake-up call to me, that um, I thought I was just having a good time, and not, but and there were many other times too when I would go to him with questions, and um, probably could have done more. We can always say that. I can certainly say that about myself, and without any hesitation. And I would probably say that um, about him. It's hard to balance ministry and family. And not that the two are mutually exclusive, right? But often we look at it that way. Um, there were other people aside from him that spoke into my life. And like I mentioned your dad, because I can think of a couple of very specific times when he counseled me. Once when he was willing to like sit down and be very, very direct with me. And so I think they all had kind of a heart for that. And sometimes it's easier to do that for other people than your own family, in terms of the time investment. But
Yes.
yeah.
Dan, I'd like to go back just a minute on something you said earlier. You're growing up, you said you lacked confidence. What did that look like tangibly in some ways? Was it in relationships? Was it when you looked in the mirror, how you were in class, in sports, whatever? How did you see that manifested? And when did you realize that to the point that you go, you know what? I don't want to live in this lack of confidence anymore. You mind talking about that?
Yeah, no, I don't mind. I don't know that I have a great answer. It's still something that I'm not especially confident even to this day. And but I think that becoming more aware of the fact of the fact that my confidence needs to be especially in the Lord and not in my own abilities has helped. Understanding my identity in Him, understanding, yeah, just trusting it with things that I like would never have thought I would be doing someday, like teaching now, teaching in front of a group of people and um, preparing lessons, week after week or several times a week. I yeah, not really I wouldn't have thought it was my cup of tea some time ago. Um, yeah, but I guess that's where God uses different kinds of people because other men on my team, there's a team of us there's 5 people and 2 of them are men, and I would say they're both fairly confident people, and I don't know that they have the same, they have other struggles. I know, but not that to the same extent. But I guess it's been progressive, is what
Okay.
I would say.
I want to affirm you in this. For you to be on a podcast, and knowing other people are going to hear this, but for you to be able to say, I'm still not confident in some areas. Dan, that's transparency. That takes courage, and that actually takes some confidence in itself to actually say that, as opposed, like I can speak for the American society because this is where I grew up. Um, we're told to put that mask on and look a certain way, sound a certain way, be a certain way. It's always about success, and the reality is we all struggle with aspects of insecurity. Um, our confidence, it fluctuates sometimes. I just want to thank you for being real about that. To go, well, no, God has done a lot in my life as far as the confidence because I realize more who I am in my relationship with Him, and yet I still struggle with confidence because here's an assumption I think some people make. So your career is a missionary, correct?
Yes.
Missionaries don't struggle with a lack of confidence at all. That's obviously not true, but how we can put people on pedestals and make assumptions about people. And here you are being able to say, guys, I know what I'm doing is what I'm supposed to do, and I'm good at it. And yet I struggle with a lack of confidence sometimes. So I just thank you for that.
Thanks.
And that's also just like a truth for, I mean, we heard Justin's story, we've heard Chris's story, we've heard my story, we've heard other people's story. Like every man lacks confidence in one way, shape, or form. And I think that's the biggest lie. That's one of the lies that the devil uses against us to be like, you're the only one that feels like you're not confident. You're just not, you're just you're not leveling up. And I think that that's the biggest thing for this, as we talk through things like this with men that are real men, like what the heck, you went through so many different countries, you are now a missionary in Africa, you have a host of people inside of your house, you have 4 kids, like there's no way that you could lack confidence, and yet even the greatest of the great do. And so I think being able to put that message out there and saying like, hey, look, you don't need to feel like you're struggling with confidence. This is a common theme for most men, and so that's like really what's what's amazing to be able to just say, hey, you know what, we're not alone, and we have some these other guys that are working through it are just normal guys. Which kind of brings me to my next question because I'm like, so now you're a father of uh adult sons and somewhat older teenagers as well. How are you navigating that, being a father to them, being somewhat of, I mean, you are the role model for them and bringing them up? Like, how is that experience today? What do you feel like you're doing differently from your father? Um, as well, so I don't know if you'd want to speak to that a little bit.
Hmm. Well, I think I tend to do a lot of things the way my dad did, and I think in general that's good. It's because I think he was a really good model. I have to keep pushing myself to uh, to invest in to spend time with. I mean, it's easier for me, I should say, to do things that are more comfortable for me that don't involve people, especially, and even it's probably easier to spend time with people outside of my family in some respects than with my family. Although it depends on what you mean by that. In the sense that I tend to just go home and want to relax. Um, my my wife is a really good example to that to me because I know she really uh, invests in each of our kids and tries to have a deep discussion with each of our kids every day.
Wow.
I don't do that every day by a long stretch, but I try to, and I interact with them um, and look for opportunities to have discussions with them. Um, my wife is more consistent at saying, we should have time in the Word, for example, and that's one thing that I've been trying to do more consistently even these last several months. Um, Maybe partly because one of the classes that I taught a few months ago was on being a good father.
Mhm.
And so wanting to apply some of that myself and really thinking through, we don't have, and each family does things differently, and we don't have a daily devotional time, but I try it once or twice a week to have a discussion about spiritual things after a meal with our kids. I mean, our kids go to a Christian school, and so they do get other input, but it's much better, of course, from at home in addition. So that's one thing that I have been working hard to do with our kids more. Um, uh,
And what is something that you feel like you've done really well as a father too? Because I know we can always look at what we can do better, and yet I know from observing how you've been with your own kids and the portion of life that I've been able to live alongside of you, which isn't much, but I have seen you with your family. Where do you feel like uh, you've done well? Because that can be it's easy to call out the things that we can improve on, but it's not as easy to call out the things that we actually do well. And I think I'd like to get to hear what you
I
think about that.
think I have a good relationship with them. Um, and not I mean, there's no walls between us. And again, I do feel like my wife is closer to most of our kids at least than I am, just because of the kind of discussions that she has with them more frequently. Um, but I feel like I have a good relationship with them and could ask them just about anything. Um, One of my sons probably am closer to than my wife simply because of personality issues and um, time spent with them in some respects has been a struggle, but in other respects I've made a priority of that. Um, so I've done my we live on the ocean here, and so two of my boys, I went and got uh, a diving certificate with them. We both enjoy that. So
Wow.
spend time spent together, I guess, and taking them camping at different times. So
So it
uh,
sounds like what you're saying is really one of the most important things. I I have three little kids, so one of the most important things I can do as a dad for them is just spend time with them, whatever that
yes,
looks like.
yes,
I do have a
yeah.
question though. I have a new daughter. And so I have two older sons, older, I mean, they're still preschool. But how have you seen differences in raising a daughter versus a son?
I don't know that I have a lot of words of wisdom on that one. Um, uh, and it's easier to, there's more, in some ways, there's more things in common with my sons and my daughter, and that they enjoy things that I enjoy. And she likes to do things that my wife enjoys more. Um, movies they watch or just sitting around chatting. That's not my forte. So it's been harder to make time to do stuff specifically with her, just alone with her. But what I have done, I've taken her out for meals at different times or for ice cream and things like that. Um, but it's been harder to find stuff to do just the two of us now that she's 18. She's actually leaving home in about a month and a half, so it's kind of going to be a huge adjustment to all of us.
That is
How
cool.
old was she when you adopted her?
6 months.
Wow. Okay. Major change for you guys coming up again. Yeah.
But yeah, it's having daughters are more, I mean, yeah, I would say up and down emotionally than boys for the most part. We've noticed that at least she is. I only have one daughter. Good things and challenging things with that one. Right.
See, I have all girls. I have three girls. They're all young adults now. I
Okay.
remember at one point I was with my nephews this years ago, and they were acting nuts, crazy. And I thought, what is wrong with them? And I was reminded, oh my, well, they're acting like boys many times, and because I was so used to how my girls act or don't act, and so I've learned to be I think, a good dad to girls, and yet I can laugh about it still. So my wife and my three daughters, I will say something that I think is hilarious or that has a certain meaning, and they'll all four look at me like, what is wrong with you? And I go, what? So anyway, there is that dynamic, and yet I have a really good relationship with them. And yet there's just, you do miss each other sometime.
Mm,
Dan, I appreciate you also said that you have learned that you have to push yourself sometimes in relationships.
mhm.
I think a lot of men are that way. So thank you for saying what you're doing by saying these things like, um, I lacked confidence at one point. Sometimes I still struggle with some confidence that I have to push myself in relationships in order to develop those. Those are things a lot of guys are thinking and feeling, but they don't put it out. And so I want to thank you for those what I would say nuggets for men to hear today.
Mm, thanks.
Those are real nuggets because it's true, right? I think that men tend to, we were talking right before the podcast with Dan, and he was like, yeah, I think I'm just trying to say, hey, what do you think a man is? And he's like, let's come back to Genesis. You were telling me, right, Dan, and being like, that's kind of like the basics of where you find man, woman being created. But then the biggest part was like complacency, I think is the word, of like Adam, when he's just like he lets the snake talk to Eve and he's just like just there. And I think that that's the big struggle for most men, is just staying inside of that comfort zone
Yeah.
and not having to really act or take action. And it's the truth today. That's exactly what that's what exactly what you're calling out, Chris, with what Dan said. And I think for me, I can see it in my life hugely, because it's so easy to just be like, somebody else will take care of it, somebody else will do it. Most likely my wife will be taking care of that. And that's not cool. That's not what God intended us to be. Um, was that kind of what you were thinking of as well?
What, me or Dan?
Yeah, I get, well, Chris or Dan actually. Does that resonate?
It does resonate with me. And I think I've shared this with you guys before, maybe in a previous episode, but I did not realize the significance of my role as a father early on with my at least my first two daughters. I remember thinking, I don't know how much time I need to spend with them. I'm just Chris. It's not a big deal. because I was raised without a father figure in my life, a healthy father figure rather, and I did not get it. Justin, as your children are young, Mark, as your children are young, your role is so vital. And I did not understand that as a young dad early on. And another thing that you guys will relate to, going back to some things that Dan said, when we struggle with a lack of a real confidence, and I did early on, that manifested itself in how I loved my daughters or pulled away from them. And there were times I should have pushed myself more, Dan, in those early days with my daughters that I did not. I was so preoccupied with things in my head many times. So, guys that are listening to this episode, man, I want them to hear these things that really happen in our brains and hearts as men. You're not alone. It's a wonderful thing to be a dad. It's a wonderful thing to be a husband. It's a wonderful thing to be a man. And yet there's a struggle and there's a challenge in every one of those areas of our lives and more.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, that really resonates. It's weird that I feel guilty that I'm more involved with my daughter than I was with my boys when they were infants. I mean, now I know why. A part of that was I don't know if you know, Dan, I was sexually abused as a child. And so I was all wrapped up in that, and I hadn't been actually addressing that properly when my boys were little. Now I've been working on that, and then my daughter was born. So it's more, I have the mental space to actually do what needs to be done.
Mhm. Mhm.
I mean, I can't go back and fix my boys' infancies, but I can be there now.
Which is
Yeah,
just,
Today, today, today's a new day.
it is. And that's
I think
actually really all that kids are wanting is just for them to their dad to be involved inside of their life, right? Sorry, I cut you off, Dan.
it is. Yeah, no, it's true. How many little kids, say want to be just like their parents, and even until it stops at some time. It's at a certain age usually, sadly, but or maybe it's sometimes a good thing. But um, I think it's normal too that you're harder, less compassionate, less gracious, and less invested in maybe your first kids. At least that was our experience. Like, I feel bad for our oldest son. We were a lot harder on him, too hard on him in some respects. And we've learned, I think, to be more gracious and more involved. And right now we have a little granddaughter, kind of a granddaughter. It's not exactly a granddaughter. Like I said, one of the young men who's living with us. Um, Long story, but he has a daughter who's a year and a half, and she's so we're kind of raising her actually.
Mm.
And so some of this is fresh in my mind, even though it's not my own daughter. But we make a point of playing with her and stuff like that. My wife did that a lot, but I was less. I did it, but wasn't like a passion like it should have been. Or
The thing
yeah.
is that you don't really have a playbook for fatherhood either. You just kind of have to like roll with the cards you've been dealt, and and be like, hey, I'm gonna do the best that I can with the knowledge that I have right now. And I think that's where we can all say, like, I mean, I can say thank you to my parents for doing what they could have done with
Mhm.
the information that they had, and we can only do better than that, right? And really it's like let's benchmark ourselves not against our parents but against God, and always be like, hey, this is who we need to be more like, and this is how God is to us. We need to
Yeah.
try and be like that with our kids as well. So I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, to come back to you, Dan, like it's amazing that you you just keep on having more and more people come inside of your home living. I just find that so cool. And I read your what do you call that, your newsletter every time it comes out, and I'm like, man, that's such a wild life. It'd be so cool to be part of that. So I'm really encouraged by that. um I was going to
Thank you.
close because we're almost done, but did anybody have any last questions for Dan, for us, or Justin and Chris for Dan?
Well, so how can we support you, Dan? Um, like, where can we find more about the work you do?
Um, Well, we work with a group called Ethnos 360. They have a website, and we're listed on there. But
We'll go
to
ahead and put it in the show comments later on so they can see
Yeah,
it.
that's not, yeah, yeah. And
okay,
also just being able to say like, hey, if there's a link for giving, because I know that that's how missionaries roll, right? It's all on gifts. So if we can get your what do you call that? Your
Contact information for that.
contact information for it, exactly. We would love to be able to support you in that as well. So
thank you. I appreciate this discussion. It's gone the ways I hadn't expected, and maybe also hasn't touched on some things that I thought it would touch. So, but really enjoyed. Um,
Well, here's
nice.
a thought then. If we didn't touch on some topics you thought we would, send those to us because we maybe need to do a part two with you at some point.
thank you again, Danny, for coming on here. We appreciate you having shared your story. And yeah, see you guys all next time.
Thank you
Thank you
for
guys.
inviting me, and thanks you for this podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to Real Life Men. If this episode spoke to you, share it with someone who you think it would speak to also. Please subscribe and leave a review for more honest conversations about manhood, identity, and real life. This podcast is brought to you by Fahrenheit Mentoring. Please visit our website at fahrenheitmentoring.org to listen to other shows and to learn more about our course on how to be a mentor. Have comments or questions to share? Your question may appear on a future episode. Email us at contact@fahrenheitmentoring.org. Until next time, keep being authentic, keep growing, and keep following our God where He leads you.